Alright, nearly finished now. I need you to grab this plastic part. This holds your reel of plastic and will host our extruder and motor. So grab a motor, make sure it fits in there. It may not stay in like this, it might be a bit looser in yours. Just make sure your holes all line up. It is going to fit right. Now before we go and screw that in, one thing you'll have to do is grab this tape. So this motor gets a little bit warm and the plastic can't really handle being warm. So we're going to put a little bit of this paper tape as a gasket to insulate the plastic from getting warm. So just cut off a nice square piece. And we're going to fit it over where the motor is going to go. So cover the holes, cover that whole area. And just grab some scissors or a knife and just cut off that extra bit. That's the way. Now we need to poke holes for the screw and for the motor shaft. You can use a knife. I'm going to use the screwdriver tip here. So just come in there, poke it through. Make sure it's big and open. And just twist it around. Plenty of room for the screw to get in there. This works best if the paper is nice and flat and stuck on well. And now this part, I'm cutting right near the edge. This is where the knife might be a little bit better, but if you've got the sharp screwdriver, as you can see, it works fine. And you don't really want any going through in between because that motor only barely fits as it is. There we go, we've cut a nice hole. There we go, so now there's a layer of paper in between the motor and the plastic to keep all the heat on the motor side. Paper just doesn't transmit the heat very well. Make sure your plug's on this side, sort of pointing towards the body, just to keep the wires out of the way later. And then we can build our extruder. So find this little bag with all these goodies in it. Now pick out this big piece here and try and hold it the way I do. And you've got this little screw. It's got a round top. It's not very long. And it fits through this little bearing here. And that just screws into that spot there. It's a bit hard to describe this. You're going to have to look and just sort of copy what I do. Screw him in. And that'll hold that bearing in place. Now this larger piece, this screw, although I'm screwing it in here, doesn't actually go in here yet. So I actually skipped that part. I'll find out soon enough I did this wrong. That's not the right one either. So this one I'm screwing in here. Also don't do this one. I'm putting this one in the wrong place. So just keep watching, you'll find out where it actually goes later. Ignore. Mr. Jake doesn't know what he's doing right now. Now this part you do want to do. Find this little guy here. It's like a cylinder. He slides in there. And just put that aside for now. So you should have these two long screws. And they're actually over long, which is why I've put these nuts on them. So you can see they need to be long enough to fit through there. But the hole in the motor doesn't go on forever. It's only about 6 millimeters deep in the motor. So it needs to be long enough to go through the plastic and into the motor, but not much longer than that, if you know what I mean. That's about the length you want. So we'll screw that guy in now. Now some of you may have even longer screws, in which case you may have to screw it in all the way, and still it's not topping out, in which case you then need to tighten the nut down onto it. So tighten in the screw and then the nut. The ones I'm using here, the nuts just sort of make the screw a bit shorter than what it is. And we're doing it this weird way just because I ran out of the right kind of screw. And this works just as well. So if the head of your screw isn't squishing it down there, you can tighten the nut down. Now, the screw you want for this one, you can see it pokes all the way through. and we'll go through the metal, through the plastic, and still have about 6 millimeters poking through. That's the screw you want. So screw it in. Now that silver bit, that just allows the hinge there to still swing back and forth. It reduces the friction. Because if we just had a screw going into a hole, it might lock that bit so it can't swing. And as you can see, it needs to be able to swing like that. Now the next thing is this little hobbed bolt. And it's just got little spikes around it, which are going to create better friction so we can push the plastic through. So it'll make sense in a minute. So I'm just finding my little Allen key now. So you want your small Allen key, fit it into these little guys here. Now be careful, if these fall out, they're really easy to lose, but you just want to pull them out enough so that you've got a clear shaft through the middle. Now, let me have a look at this. That's upside down. So you want it with the little screws pointing down, and it might still be a bit tight. So this is made to fit on really snugly. I'll just have a quick check, make sure that you have actually pulled them out all the way. Yep, the inside's clear. So if that's the case, it just needs a little bit more love to get it in. There we go. Now what you want is for those spike bits to completely cover, see that rounded little channel in the bearing. So the plastic's going to be held in there, and then the little pointy bits are going to dig into the plastic and push it along. I think we're still a little bit high there, so I'm just going to press it down a little bit. It's going to go. Yep. Let's tighten him up. So remember there's 2 of them. Alright, so now when the motor turns, the spiky bit will turn, but we need to make sure it's going to be pressed up against that bearing, which is going to be holding the plastic. So that's where we need to use the spring. So I'll just show you before we go ahead with that. So the plastic goes through the bearing there, and so it points out the other side, and you can see if I can get this held there in place with a bit of tension, as that little guy turns, pushes the plastic through. But you can see it has to be pressed up against it. So let's take that out for now. And I'll show you how to put this spring in. Now this is where I realized I've actually put the screws on the wrong sides. So let me take those out. Hopefully you listened to me earlier on when I said not to do this part. It's the wrong screwdriver. Where's that correct screwdriver? There it is. See, even Mr. Jake makes mistakes sometimes. Hard to believe, I know. There we go. Now this guy, with a rounded head, it's meant to go in this side. This is the side with the little inset hole. And he's going to go through, and he just pokes out. Now his job is just to hold the spring in place. You can see sort of the spring goes there, and that screw just stops it sliding left and right. But we need the other side as well. And this side does the same thing, but it's also adjustable, which is why it's a bit extra long. And it's a bit awkward in this position, I know. I'll try and screw him in. Nearly there. So you want him just to poke out, maybe about 2 or 3 millimeters. And here's what's going to happen. This smaller sort of thick bolt pops through the spring, and then that top screw is actually going to lock into the head of that screw, and that's how it's going to hold it. So squish him up in there, and you see to let it in we'll have to loosen this guy again. Slide him across, and then once we're back in, the screw can't escape anymore. So the whole point of that, you can see that holds the spring in place, but also if we tighten this one now, it actually presses down on the spring, which makes it push even harder on the plastic. So if you didn't screw that in at all, it probably wouldn't push against the plastic enough and it will just slip. And if you did it up way too tight, it would actually dig huge points into the plastic and squish it too much. But around about that is probably what you want. And you can see as I turn that, it pushes the plastic through now. Now if you do want to make it a little bit tighter, you just got to turn that screw, and it's hard to get at. You have to turn it really hard, and if you can't get it with your fingers, just get in there and give it a few turns with the pliers. But that's about where you want it. And if we have any trouble, we can come back and play with it in that case. Alright, so now it's time to wire it up. And it's just one more motor wire, and it goes into this fourth one there, labeled E0. So, just like the other motors, the 6-pin plug goes into the motor, and this little 4-pin one goes in the side there. Now, I can't quite get in there, so I'm going to have to take some of these guys out first. There we go, I can see what I'm doing now. Now I can't quite reach, so I'm just going to get it in position. And once it's in position, I'll grab a screwdriver and just press it in from there. You may be able to get in there with your little fingers, but my big sausage fingers can't get in there, so I'll just press it with the screwdriver. Push those guys back in. And that fits on there like that. Now there's screw holes there, so we can fix this down permanently, but we're not going to do that for now, because we're probably going to come back and troubleshoot it in a minute anyway. So next you need this guy. Now this is a nylon tube, and nylon's plastic is really slippery. Grab this little brass guy, and he just screws into the side there. Just finger tight, because you will want to be removing that later on. And just clip these little cable ties. Now, push this guy in firmly. You'll feel it slide in, and then it should be nice and stuck. You shouldn't be able to pull that out anymore. That's what you want. Now, we don't really want this twisted up, so undo it sort of carefully. Mine's probably a bit too twisted there. Now this part is pretty important, but easy to get wrong. When you push it in, you have to push it all the way to the bottom. So it'll go through first, and it might get stuck. Jiggle it, push it, and you see it goes through another big couple of centimeters. So give it a few tries. Try and push it again. Turn it a bit. Push it down. Make sure it's not going to go any further. Make sure it's fully bottomed out. And at that point, you've finished building a 3D printer. I mean, that's assuming we've got everything plugged in all right and it's going to actually work, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I've got a big roll of plastic here. You've got a smaller one, but it works exactly the same. Pull that out from there. Now, my plastic's a bit twisted, so I'm going to cut it again, and see I'm cutting it at an angle. You want it nice and straight to make sure it's not going to get stuck on the way in. And then that, you'll have to loosen it there, press on there, slide it through. And this can be annoying. Sometimes it can go straight through. You can see this time it's not going through that second hole. The plastic's just bent slightly. So, yep, forcing it's not going to work. You can try just pressing it a little bit, bending it, getting it to go in the right way. Try again. So I'm just going to not cut it, I'm just holding it with the scissors and pressing it through the hole. Once it's in the hole, you can see he'll poke his head out. And then this guy slides over it and just tighten up that screw there. Now, press the spring down and you can start to feed that plastic all the way through. So at this point, you'll want to push it all the way through so it goes all the way into the hot end. So get comfortable, loosen it up, give yourself a bit more plastic and just feed it through bit by bit. Now, if you've got good lighting, you'll probably be able to see it in the tube and know where you're up to. It's a bit hard to see with the camera. Nearly there now. Now, I'm not sure if you can see that there. We're just getting to the end now. I can see the plastic going through the last bit of the tube. You may not be able to in the camera. So when you can't push it in any further, that's it, it's ready. So just put that there. Make sure to roll it up to take up any slack. And then we can get ready to connect it to our computer. So next step is to plug in our 24-volt power supply. Make sure you've got it switched to off. So the O is switched down. Remember, it's 0 is off, 1 is on. And find that little power plug hole in the back. There's a lot of spaghetti wires back there now. There we go. And when you turn it on, you'll probably find it'll do a bunch of weird stuff. Now that's what we want. So if you see that happening, you can turn it off. And then we can get it putting on the real software. That's just a bunch of tests running. So you can see it's working. You should have that red light come on. If you don't have all this happening, what you want to do is turn it off and maybe get in contact with me because you've probably got something wired up very badly. And we'll have to fix that. You don't want to leave it turned on if it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So if you leave it plugged in and turned on when there's something wired and wrong, it can do some damage. So if it's not working, if the lights aren't coming on, just turn it off and come and ask me and we'll sort it out. And now, get the nice thick USB, because the last step is to plug it into the computer and start playing with it. You can see my wire's in the wrong spot there, so let's get that out of the way. Plug that in. All right. Now the other end goes into your laptop or your PC, and we'll get onto that in the next video. Thanks guys, well done. You have finished building it right now. Now it's time for troubleshooting and then playing with it.